Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Catherine Driscoll from Impact, and you have turned up to the Strategic Waste Outlook session this afternoon, so thank you for coming along. This is a bit of an extension on some of what has been presented and discussed this morning. We have 5 presentations from very experienced operators to share their particular insights, so I'll get on with it straight away. First up, we have Mel Walsh from the New South Wales EPA, who's going to give us a rundown on the review of the New South Wales Resource Recovery Framework and the EPA's response. Mel leads the Major Projects and Initiatives team and is responsible for the EPA's operational policy and practice advice. Mel has over 15 years' experience leading policy and strategic reform, and Mel started her career in local government and later moving into senior policy and executive roles. So please welcome Mel Walsh.
Thanks, Catherine. And before I start and reintroduce myself, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm on Gumbunya land and pay my respects to elders past, present and future. So, as Catherine said, my name's Mel Walsh. I'm the Director, Major Projects and Initiatives. Some of the things I'm working on, notwithstanding the very big piece of work, which is the implementation of the recommendations from the Resource Recovery Framework, my team is doing all of the analysis and getting together a discussion paper on the next wave of bans, design standards and phase-outs for single-use plastics. My team is also doing all of the analysis on the actual detail of the FOGO mandate, so the requirement to source separate food and garden organics. And just for fun, my team also does all of the policy work and responds to any inquiries and any issues on energy from waste in New South Wales as well. So the focus for today will really be on the review of the Resource Recovery Framework, so the recommendations, or the implementation of the recommendations. And I just want to point out that we're at the very starting point for implementation of these recommendations. So we've commenced some preliminary scoping work. We'll shortly publish a delivery plan. However, we've got some significant consultation to do, so we still need to work on a consultation plan. So you'll hear me throughout the presentation say, we will do this and we commit to that, but we haven't actually started the substantive part of the work as yet. Okay, so I think the word or the term circular economy is quite ubiquitous at the moment, and when I talk about circular economy, I really mean the broad system of a system based on reuse and regeneration of materials and products, and it's really about valuing our resources, getting as much out of our products as possible, and reducing the amount of waste that we generate. And to this end, New South Wales is working very closely with the Australian Government and other states and territories in prioritising the circular economy, and we do this. So one example of this is we're working very closely with other states and territories on harmonising definitions and principles of, for example, in the plastic space of what is a plastic, what does reusable mean? What does single use mean? Are we rolling out bans and design standards at the same time? So that's what it looks like in the plastic space, and I think there's definitely space to harmonise with other states and territories in the circular economy space as well. So a number of the key policies that inform how we make the transition to a circular economy in New South Wales. So we've got our circular economy policy statement, waste and sustainable materials strategy, plastics action plan, and climate change action plan. Okay, and the Waste and Sustainable Materials Strategy, or as we love an acronym in government, the WSAM, is the key EPA policy outlining how we'll minimise what we throw away and use and reuse our resources differently. And in doing so, we'll obviously end up with less waste in landfill, less emissions and less harm to our environment. Of course, one of the key things to this vision and to this strategy, and we acknowledge this, is that we have to have the services and infrastructure in place to deal with waste safely to ensure it doesn't become a problem for future generations. So the WASAM outlines some of the actions over the next 6 years, but some of the key reform areas, and a couple of them are sitting with me. The WASAM outlined that we would review the resource recovery framework. So it was the review of the resource recovery framework is very much in a circular economy context. The WASAM also outlines how we'll phase out problematic single-use plastics, provides for financial incentives for manufacturers and producers to design out problematic plastics, sets government procurement standards to prioritise recycled materials, and mandates the separation of food and garden organics for households and businesses. So the review. Just a little bit of background on the resource recovery framework. For those, I'm sure everyone knows about it, but it's the policy, regulatory and compliance and administrative framework administered by the EPA to facilitate beneficial resource recovery and circular economy objectives. Under the WASAM, as I mentioned, a priority under the WASAM was to review the framework. So that review, we engaged Dr. Cathy Wilkinson in November 2021. She did a review last year. It was an independent review, so Dr. Wilkinson was a former head of the Victorian EPA, and that review was accompanied by quite a comprehensive issues paper. We received just over 60 submissions on the issues paper. And the purpose of the review was to really look at the existing waste recovery framework to provide recommendations to the EPA on such things as how well does the framework protect the environment and human health, how well it receives beneficial resource recovery and facilitates circular economy outcomes, and importantly, the framework's transparency, clarity and enforceability. And so Dr. Wilkinson's final report was delivered to the EPA in September last year, and it includes 22 recommendations to help strengthen the resource recovery framework in New South Wales. So we grouped the 22 recommendations into 4 thematic themes, and those are improved administration and decision making, consideration of definition of waste and enhancing the regulatory framework, enabling high quality materials to facilitate circularity, and improving approaches to known and emerging contaminants. So we as in the EPA released our response to the review in December last year. We supported in principle all 22 recommendations and are committed to implementing and delivering on all 22 recommendations within the next 5 years. Of course, some of them are a little bit easier to implement than others, so we're hoping, and I'll go through some of the way that we've prioritised some of these recommendations, but we're hoping to get some of them delivered, particularly the guidance materials, within the next 18 months. So now I'm just going to go over the actual 4 thematic themes. So improved administration and decision making. So this includes recommendations relating to improving transparency around decision making, increasing trust and confidence in the framework, making it easier to navigate for industry participants. So whilst talking about the orders and exemptions, so whilst they're legally binding documents, our stakeholder feedback was loud and clear that they're very difficult to understand and quite opaque. So to that end, we've committed to improve the guidance material on how decisions are made on orders and exemptions, how you apply for an order and exemption, and the information required as part of the application process, the actual EPA assessment process and the EPA's considerations, how we determine sampling requirements, and how we determine contamination limits. We're also, again, from stakeholder feedback, we'll also develop and publish a clear process for the issuing and revocation of general orders and exemptions, and we'll look and provide information on how we review decisions on orders and exemptions. This was not surprisingly based on pretty strong feedback of the process for revocation, particularly revocation of orders, and that it was not clear why the EPA in some instances had decided to revoke specific orders and exemptions. Outcome 2, so considering the definition of waste and improving the regulatory framework. So this includes recommendations to support higher order use of materials in the economy by shifting the focus from viewing materials as waste to seeing them as resources, and building pathways for increased reuse and remanufacture. So key recommendations, processing and storing of recovered materials. So this is where we'll investigate whether certain activities involving the use, processing or storage of recovered materials should be excluded from the regulatory framework. It involves considering an end-of-waste framework for common low-risk materials to better enable reuse. And it also involves looking at an innovation pathway to support research and demonstration of technologies or processes that don't necessarily easily fit into our licensing system. So outcome 3, the enabling high quality materials to facilitate circularity. So this includes recommendations that focus on existing regulatory tools, plans and systems to improve the quality of materials flowing through the circular economy. So under this outcome, we'll develop and publish regulatory plans to target specific waste and resource sectors. We'll consider how our regulatory elements can better achieve high quality material from waste generators. And we'll look at ways to enhance protections for consumers of recovered resources and place greater responsibility on generators and processors. And the final outcome, improving approaches to known and emerging contaminants. So this contains recommendations relating to improving how we manage contaminants. So during the stakeholder engagement, stakeholders requested more flexibility in dealing with contaminants. And the review also identified the need for clear communication around legacy and emerging contaminants. So the review recommends an external scientific expert should be engaged to provide advice to the EPA and to New South Wales on the approach to management of asbestos in waste and recovered materials. It also recommends that the EPA should implement a proactive program to investigate and engage with stakeholders about emerging contaminants. Oh, wrong one. Next. Okay. So next steps. So we've started implementing some, or at least scoping some of the recommendations from the review. So we'll release a delivery plan very shortly, hopefully in the next few weeks, where we'll demonstrate what we're actually doing, and we'll have timeframes or indicative timeframes against each recommendation. And we've put each of the recommendations against short, medium and longer term timeframes. So over the next now to 5 years. But within the next now to 18 months, we'll deliver the new and updated guidance materials for orders and exemptions, which includes how decisions are made, how to apply, the assessment process, the EPA's considerations, sampling and contamination requirements as well. We're going to review the form, structure and content of resource recovery orders and exemptions, making them easier to understand while still being enforceable. We've engaged the Office of Chief Scientist and Engineer to review and provide advice on the New South Wales approach to the management of asbestos contaminants in waste as well. So stakeholders have particularly said to us that they're interested in reforms to create an innovation pathway to support a circular economy, and investigations around whether certain materials should be excluded from aspects of the waste regulatory framework, as well as a lot of interest in an end-of-waste framework. So some of these are much longer-term things, specifically the end-of-waste framework, because it potentially involves regulatory or legislative amendment. But we've started scoping the work on the innovation pathway, and we'll be certainly working with other agencies across New South Wales and Australia, and we'll be looking to consult quite comprehensively with stakeholders and industry on the innovation pathway, and in fact, all of the recommendations. Within the next 3 to 5 years, the more complex one that we'll investigate is whether activities that use, process or store recovered materials should be included from the regulatory framework. Really the aim of this, based on the feedback, is to reduce the administrative burden on industry, whilst also achieving greater environmental benefits and a stronger circular economy. But as part of this work, we also need to understand material flows, and that materials that reused, recovered materials are seen as desirable and marketable and have a competitive advantage potentially to virgin alternatives. So as I said, we've commenced some of the work, some of the scoping work. We're hoping to come out with a pretty comprehensive consultation and engagement plan for each of the individual recommendations over the coming month or 2 months. However, I ask you to be patient. So this piece of work sits within my team. It's a massive piece of work for the EPA. It touches on almost every single division and branch within the EPA, so the policy team, the technical team, the operations team and the legal team. Everyone has a level of involvement in supporting us to implement these recommendations. So it is one of the biggest reforms to the framework, I think, since the framework began. So it's just going to take us a little while. Things do take a little while in government, but it's exciting and it's something that I'm really looking forward to rolling out over the next, now to next 5 years. So that's me. I'm happy to stay up here if there's any questions or come up later once we've finished with questions.
Thanks, Sarah. Not sure. I'm working now. There is a roving mic around the floor, so please raise your hand if you have a question for Mel. It is an enormous amount of work, Mel, so appreciate you sending that message that there's a lot of work to be done, but it ties in with everything that we've been talking about this morning in terms of what government has to do to respond to what's happening in the industry. So thank you very much. Some question over here.
Yeah,
if you could just, if you have a question, just wait till the microphone comes to you because we've got an online audience as well, and just introduce yourself and where you're from when you get the mic. Thank you.
Joe Jerusalem, Noosa Council.
What council was it?
Noosa? Yes, out a bit further north.
I know where that is.
Bit further north, yeah. You're just some little place up there. Wonderful work and stuff that the EPA is doing, but you're targeting specific problem areas, such as a problem that we've had through the storms and all the rest. It was styrofoam. Is styrofoam on your agenda, and what are you doing about a product like styrofoam?
Look, we haven't looked at one of the big things that we'll certainly be looking at is construction and demolition waste and industrial waste. We actually haven't landed on any specific themes at the moment or specific things that we're going to focus on. That will come out in the consultation, hopefully.
Hi, Esther Hughes from MRA Consulting. Thank you, Mel, for your work. Obviously, the EPA is working really hard at the moment. From this morning's presentation, there were questions around the planning system, the comments that it takes a really, really long time. Are there any plans to improve that? And I know that's not your department, but it'd be appreciated if you can give some feedback.
Yeah, there is. I mean, it's slightly outside of the scope of what we can give effect to. However, there is a recommendation that we work with our planning colleagues to streamline the system and have better processes in place, working very closely with the planning system, with the people from planning. So it's certainly actually stakeholders. When we did some feedback on the second tranche of feedback that we did on our response, that was actually quite important for a lot of industry stakeholders. That was how we integrate and streamline with the planning system in terms of waste processing and generation. So yes, it is something that we'll be looking at. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you. And if you could just thank Mel for her presentation, there'll be a bit of time at the end for some more questions. There will be some time at the end for some more questions, but we'll move on to the next one. Vanessa Seaton is going to give the Re.Group view. I've got a few industry presentations in this session this afternoon. Vanessa has over 27 years experience in the industry with a demonstrated history of successful contract management, working collaboratively with her customers in both local government and the private sector. Having held a variety of roles in the last 27 years, Vanessa joined Re.Group in October 2022. So please welcome Vanessa Seaton.
Afternoon, everyone. I felt like my presentation was presented in the last session. Common themes that have come out from last session, and you'll hear again today, but the good news is we're probably all on the same page and we need to get somewhere together. So when my manager asked me if I was comfortable to present at Coffs this year, it gave me, the time to think, have I been at Re.Group long enough? Do I know enough to present? But I thought back, well, I've, as Catherine said, been in this industry for just over 27 years. And the picture I've presented today is when I started with Moon's Recycling, one of the first MRF operators in Sydney. And the pioneer of our industry, Victor Moon, collected bottles. He was known as a bottle-o, and collected bottles in the Botany Council area. So when I came in before we did the presentations today, there was a bit of conversation about, gee, we're hearing the same things that we've heard for years on end, are we getting anywhere? But when I was thinking about this presentation, I thought about where have I come from? Have I got enough knowledge to present? And strategically, where is the industry at? Where's it going? And, if I look at that photo, we now have electric vehicles collecting bottles. We have robotics in MRFs. We did curbside sort, which, came up in the last session. The suggestion that you go back to a source separation, to have a cleaner product. I guess that's what CDS is doing for us now. So we have come a long way. And I've come a long way. I started in a MRF some 27 years ago, and I find myself back at Re.Group in amongst MRFs again. Who is Re.Group? For those of you in the room that haven't heard of us or don't know a lot about us, it's the only Australian company that builds, owns, operates recycling facilities across Australia. They operate under three main pillars: the RDT pillar, the design and technology arm of the business, the recycle arm of the business, which is the MRF side of the business, the commingled household recycling processing spread throughout Australia, and the return it side of the business, or the CDS, so Queensland, WA, New South Wales, ACT, and just recently announced a major CDS network operator in southern Melbourne and the Gippsland region. There's a few of us here at the conference. We'll get there. So the team, Garth, our Chief Development Officer, and some of his team, Gail, Allard, Sahanya, and myself. We do have a booth. Some of you have been there and done the skill tester. It's almost like the robotic that we have in the MRF. Everyone's a winner, so come on by, and I'm sure you won't be disappointed. So the Re.Group vision, what's driving our business? We're focused on maximising positive environmental and social impacts, trying to provide solutions for recycling and recovery of resources, moving towards a more resilient and professional sector. We're concentrating at Re.Group on improving our MRFs, on developing new MRFs. The communication and relationships with our customers, open and transparent communication. The medium-term outlook, we believe, is quite positive, but we also feel that there's pain before we get the gain. And I guess that was, the theme in the last session too. There's a fair bit of pain there, but like I said, we've moved forward and we can continue to move forward. Contingency planning is also a big thing. I haven't been in any of the other sessions, so I don't know if it's come out, but that's another part of, we were unfortunately the operator of the ACT MRF that had the devastating fire in late December. Contingency planning is critical. I'm part of a SS Rock resilience group trying to look at how we get resilience in our network. Infrastructure planning has come up as well. We need the infrastructure to deal with whatever product it is that we're collecting, all parts of our theme and where we're heading. Specifically, glass beneficiation plants, plastic processing plants, they're two areas that Re.Group will look to focus on. The planning pathways, that bit of pain before the gain. So we do have intent to develop new MRFs, to get consent for increased capacity, modifications, but all these things take time. Nothing happens overnight. COAG bans come into force and the infrastructure's not there ready to take on what the COAG bans have created. It's a harder place to get approvals. New South Wales is particularly hard to get approvals. It doesn't matter what sort of facility you're trying to develop. It's hard, the timelines are hard. There needs to be some alignment with the planning pathways, with policy, infrastructure development. And at the same time, industry and policy need to align for availability and capability. The partnership approach, you know, it's something that I personally see is critical in any relationship that you have with your customer. It's an honest and transparent communication that you need to have. You need to work collaboratively. But in that, you know, in the last session, Chris spoke about, you know, the inflation cost, the cost of you win a tender today, but you may not build that for several years, and what are the costs then? The downturn in commodity markets, like as a single processor, we can't take all the risk. We want to stay viable. You need us to stay viable as customers as well. So, you know, and I don't think any of us have answered how we're going to get there because, you know, councils, for obvious reasons, are risk adverse. Is it state government taking control of that? How is it going to work? But at the very end of it, we need to work together and have that collaborative partnership approach. We all need to win. There shouldn't be one winner and a loser. If you're in it together, then you'll have a far better approach. Cost of producing things, you know, as be it FOGO, you know, there was a lot of talk at the Aurora session on Monday on the quality of product coming in. There's been a lot of talk about we're manufacturers. We're manufacturers, and the quality of product coming in is a direct correlation of what you're producing, and then the markets that you have. Market developments are also a big part of it. So if we can work in partnership, that honest and transparent communication of whether the product's good or whether it's shit, we need to be there together, and we've got to work through it. You know, we can't sell what there's no market for, and we can't produce a product from shit. Short and sweet for me. Sorry, I missed my slide there. Oops. Not sure if this is going to play. Wheels of positive change in policy, regulation and infrastructure development can be slow and painful, but if we all work in partnership, it's a more enjoyable ride than when the horse and cart are going in different directions.
Again? Oh, all right. Thank you. Some really great comments there, Vanessa, particularly around collaboration and making sure that everybody is taken on the same journey. What do you see as the main barriers to improving collaboration, particularly in New South Wales? Is it the tendering regs again?
Contracts that come out can be very difficult to be able to respond to without, you know, Susie spoke about it before, if there is not that risk sharing, then you need to build in that cost factor, but it can be a very expensive cost. It may not necessarily occur, So if you've got an alliance from the beginning and you take the wins and the losses together, then hopefully it all balances out. But I do understand from a council perspective, it is, and it's been expressed, it's very hard to get council contracts changed so that there is more risk. But there are methods. It's I guess even been open to a tender comes out and it's kind of black and white. That's what how you've got to respond to it. If there is that approach where it can be more negotiation, then potentially you get to a win-win situation, which we have done. We've got a great relationship, in the Swara Murph in South Australia. It's a real alliance with 3 councils and us as operator. It's a great example of where you can come together. I've managed other contracts in my previous life where, it's a real partnership approach and they're so much easier to manage.
Definitely. When we're working in this space, we know what happens in the other states in terms of tendering regs, and they seem to be miles ahead of what we're able to do in New South Wales. And it's also hard to get across that message to local councils that, given the constraints of the regs, that we often need to reject tenders in order to negotiate. That's not necessarily a failure of a tender process, but it does present a whole range of other risks for local councils. We lose the competitive tension that we have in a tender process, and so it's not the best outcome for any party, really. So, yeah, I agree with you on that. I think Jackie's got the microphone. Is there somebody... Any questions for Vanessa?
I'm happy to start work as a bottle-o if anyone has a run for it. I've got the horses. Thank you.
Okay, one from Richard here.
Oh, Richard. You weren't going to let me off, were you?
Thanks, Vanessa. Richard Collins from Arcadis. We had some talk earlier in the session about state government somehow underwriting risk or something. I just wanted to know if you could unpack that a little.
I don't have the... I furiously took notes when Chris McLean mentioned it earlier. I don't know what the answer is. Obviously, there's the councils talk about levy coming back in, and I'm not sure what it is, Richard, but it's a resident that ends up paying. It's not council as such, is it? It's the resident, some people are just coping as they are. So to increase rates isn't necessarily the answer. So I don't have the answer, but it's certainly something worth exploring, probably.
Vanessa.
Thank you.
Please thank Vanessa for her presentation. Okay, our other industry operator is Bingo, and Matt Hyatt is the Head of Sustainability for Bingo Industries and is going to give us the Bingo view on improving outcomes through industry innovations. Matt has 8 years of experience in the resource recovery sector with positions at the EPA, industry and in consulting. So Matt has a wide range of experience in dealing with a range of stakeholders. Please welcome Matt Hyatt.
Thanks, everyone. I'm a long-time listener, first-time presenter, so just wary if there's a few hiccups. So Matt Hyatt, Head of Sustainability at Bingo Industries, been there about 9 months. So my KPIs are to end modern slavery in our supply chain, decarbonise a $2 billion business, and to divert all waste from landfill. So quite the targets, but I should have looked at that closer in the job description before I took it on. But I think they're all fantastic goals to reach as well. So just an overview of Bingo. So Bingo's now got operations in metropolitan areas in Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. We have 19 resource recovery centres, 2 landfills, a number of transfer stations, and then 2 more advanced recycling facilities, one in Eastern Creek in New South Wales and the other in West Melbourne in Victoria. And I'll come to it later, but we also have a bin manufacturing business, Toro, which a lot of our competitors use, which I think is a great, really supports the quality of that service. So Bingo's role in the circular economy, so circular economy is quite wide-ranging, but Bingo really provides a vital service in that recycling component of those Ellen MacArthur Foundation diagrams that you see. So we're in collections, it goes through a series of our recovery facilities, or we also use a lot of our partner facilities. Like everyone in the waste industry, you can't do it alone. As it goes through our facilities, a bulk of our recovery is done through our eco products range, so a series of mulches, sand, road base and aggregates that will then go back into landscaping and infrastructure projects. And then the other key thing that we're working on at the moment is our offtake partners, and really tying into the manufacturers in Australia. The federal government has its Remade in Australia campaign. That's really just kicking off, but I think that will really be vital to continuing that flow. And as most of you probably know, landfilling, we've got soft plastics, hard plastics, building rubble, textiles, engineered timber. It's not quite ready yet, but there'll be a big announcement on engineered timber in the coming weeks, so look out for that. Just got a quick video, just a bit of an overview.
Bingo delivers services across the entire waste and recycling value chain. From our network of recycling centres and transfer stations located across Sydney, we collect building and demolition and commercial and industrial waste. Collected waste is sent to our Eastern Creek Recycling Ecology Park in Western Sydney's Growth Corridor, where construction of Bingo world-class recycling precinct is well underway. When waste arrives on site, it is sent to our Master Recycling Facility, Australia's largest and most advanced resource recovery centre. Waste arriving at the centre is tipped on the 2,500 square metre tipping floor, and automated cranes feed waste into the plant, where it travels along the centre's sophisticated network of conveyors. When complete, this centre will be capable of recovering up to 90% of materials. To maximise recovery rates, waste is shredded and processed through the centre's state-of-the-art processing zones. The centre's system of advanced separators include screen, drum, air and magnet separators, which sort materials by type, size, density and weight, resulting in highly accurate sorting and a higher quality end product. The park system of external conveyors then transports materials to a variety of product manufacturing facilities. Recycled products produced on site include washed sand and soils, and Bingo's eco products range of recycled aggregates, road base and mulch. These products are then collected by customers and taken back out into the market to help build new buildings and infrastructure. Our Recycling Ecology Park will assist Sydney to close the resources loop and prevent valuable materials from ending up in landfill.
We're looking to build an exact replica of those types of operations in Brisbane and Melbourne in the future as well. Just another part of the business, quickly spoke to Toro before, so waste equipment manufacturers, we've operations in all states. And then the other part of the business that's relatively new is Jura. It's a joint venture, Indigenous, with Yalligan Training. So offer those services obviously across Brisbane, Melbourne and Sydney as well. And that's really to help a lot of our key customers, the tier one builders, have Indigenous spend requirements. And it's a great way. And the company's now looking at using ex-offenders to come through their training processes and into Bingo or Jura's operations. And if anyone's working on a reconciliation action plan, get in touch. I can put you in touch with Bingo's Indigenous manager, Nat Davies, who's helping out a lot of the tier one builders. I should be happy to help. So just a bit of it's kind of been spoken about a few times, but the industry today, so how did we get here? We have all the actions on the left-hand side that we've done with varying degrees of success or efficiency. In the last 5 years, we've done an additional 5 million tonnes of diversion capacity. And the impact, all those facilities on the right, talking to all of these facilities that are coming on board that are really going to push us to our waste diversion goals. So we're roughly at 66% diversion. However, during this time, the burden of actions, as we all know, have fallen on local councils and the waste industry. Australia still remains around the top 10 per capita in emissions. Biodiversity is declining. The newest report was quite sad as an ecologist myself. And waste generation has increased by 3% since 2016-17. So we've got, depending on your target, we have 14 to 34% remaining to divert by 2030. We've heard energy from waste is unlikely to fill the gap unless you live in Perth. By 2030, those facilities take anywhere from 5 to 10 years to develop. Organics implementation is going to be staged from commercial in quite a few states from 2025 to 2030 for businesses and councils. And why we really need to innovate, for me, being based in Sydney, the landfill constraints by 2030 in Sydney are going to be massive. And all that's going to do is push these facilities. We're going to be landfilling or energy from waste in regional areas based on the current regulations. Product stewardship is pretty piecemeal at the moment, so it's really not providing the solution needed. And it's going to lead to increased costs and mixed targets. Now, a very selfish point of view, what are my targets? And most of you people in this room will share similar targets. So bingo, we're pushing for a waste-free Australia. So we talk about diverting 100% of allowable materials from landfill. Number one, asbestos-contaminated soils and asbestos waste is still going to be a massive problem and can only be landfilled by law in New South Wales. We want to maximise the value and circularity of recovered materials where possible, and then if we can't, maximise the energy recovery from residual materials. And then the second key goal for us, bingo and my Macquarie Bank, we have a strong target and Macquarie makes sure I'm going to meet it. So we have an interim 2030 target of 50% emissions reduction from 2020 for scope 1 and 2. And we've signed up to RE100, which requires us to use renewable electricity only from our sites from 2025. And that's going to involve electrifying a few of our sites that operate off diesel generators. And using diesel generators, unless you are in South Australia or Tasmania, if you use electricity off the grid, you're actually going to increase your emissions because of how much the grid emissions are based on coal at the moment. Now, what's the push for everyone to innovate? The federal government target of 80% recovery, 10% waste reduction per capita, and achieving the circular economy. I'll get to what that means later or what it doesn't. And the federal government net zero target now we have a federal government that believes in climate change, is 43% reduction from 2005 levels and net zero by 2050. So, in the room, what have you and your supply chain committed to, and what are you willing to commit to? Commitments are really important because they lock in decision makers. You have a public-facing commitment and you don't meet that. Hopefully that leads to further actions to make sure you meet that. I was lucky enough my predecessor locked in those targets, so I didn't have to have those discussions with the board, or Macquarie enforce them for all their assets. So circular economy, what's the target? I personally think there's still a bit of a lack of clarity on what the circular economy targets are, what is and is not circular. It's already been touched on. We've lost significant resources to the uncertainty of what is recyclable, what is circular, what is allowable with EMU, recovered fines and energy from waste. And it's still quite unclear how the government will regulate process engineered fuels, advanced or chemical recycling and recycled content when it potentially affects quality. A big one that's come up for me lately is sustainable aviation fuel. It's one that it'd be great to use a lot of sugarcane to do that, but we're going to be taking up very valuable agricultural land. Waste would be a perfect, or landfill gas would be a perfect option, but is that going to be allowable long term? Qantas doesn't want to sign a 2 or 3 year agreement. They want to lock away quite a long term. Now, net zero, you have a target, what next? I think net zero is, at least it's a clear goal, but it is immense. So once you stop hyperventilating about what that means as a growing business, constantly needing to decarbonise, you develop a live decarbonisation strategy. And that's really just about, the technology is constantly going to change. For net zero, regional councils that own their own landfills, be the same problem as me. You'll still have fugitive emissions, most likely from your landfills beyond 2030 and 2040. How are you going to decarbonise your fleet, electric or hydrogen? But I think for me, I'm just trying to get the business to assess the carbon cost of all of projects that we're looking to implement, and using the current Australian carbon credit unit as a good proxy for, if we don't do this action now, when we are not going to hit our targets, what's the offset cost going to be? And just really incorporating that into the business case modelling. And then scope 3 emissions, they'll be significant for most businesses and the majority. And their estimates only really at the moment, their estimates are getting better, but until those suppliers undertake their own reporting, it's probably plus or minus 20%, I think. So how do we reach the targets? I think we've spoken about a lot of these, but I think there's 4 key pillars: education, legislation, technology, and advocacy. The advocacy piece, we've still got a lot of work to do. I really think we need to have a look at what the decarbonisation industry is doing, especially the clean energy industry, as a good blueprint forward. Technology, I think most of the technology is there except for the data and the benefits of machine learning and AI. So how do we reach the targets? Make commitments so your decision makers can't go back on them. Enter into strategic partnerships, because you won't be able to do it alone. Assess the net position. If we're looking, for example, of having energy from waste or landfills in our regional areas, how much emissions and how much congestion are we causing on regional roads to make that happen, instead of having energy from waste closer to the source? Or another one for me is energy from waste. You can displace coal, but you can't displace natural gas. I don't understand where that comes from, so it'd be great to know and advocate for reform. Look forward to working together, and if you're interested, there's a few podcasts, and a quick plug for Macquarie's podcast. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Great presentation. Great to see an example of how a business has to take that holistic approach right across all of the interests of the company. So thank you for that. I'm interested to hear what waste streams Bingo is going to target next, and what plans you have for additional infrastructure.
Yep, so I think the additional waste streams is really going to be focusing on the heavier waste streams, so engineered timbers, the hard plastics, and contaminated soils will be a focus area. In terms of infrastructure, it'd definitely be looking at expanding the MPC2 capacity, something similar to that in Brisbane and Melbourne, but also very keen to work with local councils on their bulky wastes, green waste transfer stations, potentially putrescible waste transfer stations as well.
Okay. You've said all the right things from my point of view. Thank you. Anyone from the floor have a question for Matt at Bingo? Thanks, Jackie.
Hi, great presentation. Thanks, Matt. Lee Smith from Veolia. Look, I'd be interested, are you prepared to state what you think circular economy currently means?
I think it would be the National Waste Action Plan targets, that 80% diversion from landfill. Beyond that, I don't think we have enough information to do another specific target. We don't have enough information on what our manufacturers' inputs are, what recycled content percentages could be. So I think that additional data is needed first.
So quite a bit different from what the popular understanding of the term is?
Yes. I think in practicality, you can say it's circular, but unless you're able to show it, and if we start sending, I just don't think our manufacturing industry is big enough. So there was a big problem with glass sand. People see that as downcycling, but when we're importing bottles from Mexico, unless we start talking about import tariffs like the Europeans are with carbon, doing that on a material flow basis. I know CSIRO and governments are looking at that. But yeah, it'd be great to have that data ASAP before we can commit to it. I want to have a realistic commitment.
No other questions? You're off the hook, Matt. Thank you, Matt. Okay, so now we're going to get into the people that know everything, the consultants. And Richard Collins is the National Discipline Manager, Waste Advisory for Arcadis Australia. Richard has worked for a decade, or did work for a decade before he joined Arcadis, as an influential analyst and commentator with Inside Waste. So a great viewpoint to have across the whole industry. Now at Arcadis, Richard works right across the waste and resource recovery agenda and at scales ranging from strategic national projects through to facility appraisal, project business cases and investment due diligence. So please welcome Richard Collins.
Good afternoon all. Catherine set me up, I think, on that comment. So I'd like to zoom out a little on where we've gone this morning. We heard a lot from the industry perspective on challenges, and they're very real around infrastructure, particularly in New South Wales. We did the infrastructure needs assessment that underpinned the strategy, and I spoke last year about some of those gaps, residual waste, the transition around organics, etc. This year I'd like to kind of pick up on some of the themes that we had coming through around supply chain and value chain alignment, and how do we get beyond the business case, which Phil Carbon's articulated really well this morning, feedstock, site, facility, offtake, regulation. And just zoom out and think about the value chain and how do we get the materials that we need. Arcadis is a global company, 30-odd thousand employees. In Australia, we have offices Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Perth, and I run the waste team nationally. So I just want to look a bit beyond that business case that Phil articulated, and I'm going to just take you through two particular projects. Catherine mentioned the national projects that we do, and it's two national projects that I'm going to talk about and how they are kind of informing the direction of the industry long term. It's kind of a policy piece more than, and it's not that you're going to see impact tomorrow, and it's different to Mel. This is more directional long term. The two projects I'm going to talk about, one is about eco-design, activating eco-design. The federal government hasn't done anything in that space for 20 odd years, and early last year they commissioned RMIT and ourselves and One Planet Consulting, and I think Helen's in the room somewhere, to look at how do we reactivate eco-design and start at the top of the circle rather than just keep focusing on the bottom end of it, and make it easier all the way around the circle, including for local government. The other piece is on harmonisation of curbside collection, which is probably more comfortable space for those in this room. But this APCO chart, I quite like that because it kind of shows the complexity and the linkages and the various stakeholders involved, and that is emblematic of the challenge ahead of us. So let me talk eco-design for a little. We did a global review of policy measures and frameworks and mechanisms to see what was done overseas around activating eco-design. We looked at Europe, Japan, the US, and we looked at where Australia was going and where we're at. We then did some workshops and a kind of detailed consultation process, including with the waste and resource recovery industry, but a lot of with production manufacturers, retailers, etc. And I'll show some of those in a minute. The idea that the federal government had for this is how do we make sure future-proof our manufacturing sector, make sure that we are aligned to circular economy expectations in the world. How do we also make the most of our resources and security in a COVID-impacted world where supply chains are constrained and we're over-consuming the world's resources. And then particularly, how do we align with the recycling sector? So that's a sample of the sorts of companies we engage with. Again, not many that you would see in this room. They are informed by the 4-sector deep dives that we did. So we looked at the built environment and buildings in particular. we looked at plastics, we looked at textiles, and looked at consumer electronics. And each of those have a reasonable domestic footprint in terms of manufacturing, but also a waste footprint. And so those were selected, and we also wanted to work with the willing. And so all of those sectors have those sorts of strong engagement. Green Buildings Council, the Product Stewardship Scheme for textiles through the Fashion Council, etc. And we realised when we kind of started charting where all the action is around this space, that globally and in Australia, that we play very much in the voluntary early adopter space. This is the kind of classic innovation diffusion curve. Helen from One Planet developed this as an adaptation. And we are still playing far too much in that left-hand space. So voluntary measures, APCO's, I guess, a classic example, right, where we heard it earlier. We know we're not going to hit those national packaging targets because there's not sufficient clarity and sufficient rigour in that to kind of engage the whole chain. So we kind of have come up with 10 different levers that try and push into that space down the right-hand side. And I'll kind of talk to how that then plays into recovery in a minute. These 10 levers, let me just get them all up rather than do the dog and pony show. So the first one is we need a long-term strategy. We looked at the Circular Economy Action Plan in Europe. We looked at Japan's got a similar 20-year vision around where they want to go with circular economy. And we realised that long-term, if you want to reduce friction of this transition, you need to give people the time to make that transition. And we're talking everything from manufacturing to recovery and all around the chain. Procurement, number 8, has been mentioned a few times. Procurement in this sense is that end market. You need to have measures to pull that material through. We need financial and regulatory reform, particularly looking at levies, looking at grants. And that's not just the conventional way of have a landfill levy, but do we have support for green buildings, for example, or use of specific recycled content materials? Let me just dive into the building sector as one example of how we're trying to bring this to life a little bit. What the Green Buildings Council in particular told us, there was 3 of those levers that made sense to them and they thought were priorities, and one is this long-term strategy. So this Eco-Design for a Circular Australia strategy would be driven by a permanent committee of industry and government working together. So it's a bit like the Circular Economy Ministerial Advisory Council that has been announced. Now, this has been sitting with the feds since late last year, so I'm not taking credit for that committee, but this is the sort of thing where we do need government and industry working together to set those kind of long-term strategies. The sorts of goals in the built environment that we would be looking for that to develop are sort of national goals. So the Dutch and the Belgians, for example, have net zero targets for their built environment for buildings. They have recycled content targets. So if we start setting those sorts of things, start embedding that in national construction code, for example, those recycled content requirements, that's going to pull that through, provide opportunities for earlier up the chain and the likes of Matt at Bingo and help his targets. National safety standards. So we don't have good control of what comes into this country. We don't, in battery fires, we keep seeing in Garth's Murphs in Canberra. We don't have quality control over batteries. I was talking to Libby Chaplin before, and there is not sufficient clarity around those battery management systems and battery control to really understand that. So we need standards and safety standards, and also then around what can be recycled and safely recycled, so chemical content, for example. The role of enforcement in Europe, there's much stronger enforcement of those sorts of standards around products. They have something called the RAP Index, which is a rapid information exchange system, where if a product doesn't meet standard, that information is rapidly rolled out, and compliance across different, all the jurisdictions of Europe have information. ACCC at the moment, yes, they're looking at greenwashing, but they're not playing very actively in getting down into the details. The other 2 goals, and I'll particularly talk to the standards and specifications one, I've kind of gone around it a little bit already, but the Green Buildings Council and other builders were very strong on this idea of Australian standards. We need to raise our standards to global standard, not reinvent the wheel, but how do we do that, including recycled content? What clarifies as an adequately specified recycled material? Is there a minimum content? And also standards, performance standards around that to provide confidence in the system. Embedding into the construction code, and then building materials passports. This is an idea out of Europe again, an inventory of all the materials, the recyclability of those materials, how do you recycle those materials that goes with every new building that's built, obviously commercial buildings, I'm not talking residential ones. So in 20 years' time, we know if it's safe to pull that apart, we know how to disassemble it, how to reuse it. This is just a diagram of the sort of 10 levers, and it's a kind of a variation of the butterfly diagrams that we see sometimes around the circular economy. Product domain on the right, materials domain on the left. And what we're trying to do is capture more of that in the product domain initially, so reuse, refurbish, repair, and then circling back through, there's a couple of measures to increase the diversion from landfill. I'm not going to read all those 10 ones on the top, but you'll see that for the built environment, the buildings sector, the three that we've kind of prioritised are system-wide. They're not individual interventions, but they do operate across the line and around the chain, and including landfill levies, differential landfill levies for materials to try and drive specific materials out of the chain. That report was launched about a month ago. It is online. There's a link in the presentation, and you can find individual chapters for the built environment, plastics, textiles, and consumer electronics if you don't want to wade through the 260 odd pages of the main report. Circling a little closer to home then, another national project that we're only part way through, so I will only be careful how I discuss this, is harmonisation in curbside collection. That's come up a few times, this idea, and it very much is on the agenda. So in April 2021, State and Territory and Commonwealth Environment Ministers made the commitment on the screen up there to work towards improving the harmonisation of municipal waste collection. The idea is to improve the value and the volume of materials collected. MSW, recovery rates have been fairly flat for quite a while now. So how do we make some change? And this is seen as one of those opportunities. So again, another literature review, another look overseas as to what best practice is around there. We talk to all the states and territories to understand their models, etc. And where we are going around harmonisation is not that everybody has exactly the same model, but it's working towards more consistency and more compatibility of the systems with enough flexibility between states and between regions to accommodate necessary needs, but to lift up local government levels to the next better practice level that makes sense in their context. The idea is that we're improving participation at the curbside and minimising contamination. So we saw the Clean Away Recycling behaviours survey. Still 39% of people are confused about what goes in your yellow bin. That's an increase on the last time they did it. So this idea of increased harmonisation and increased consistency is leading to behaviour changes. That's the concept. And then increasing the capturing and quality of targeted material. So what are we putting in that bin? How often are we collecting it? What are we not putting in the bin at the same time? And so all these things are kind of in the mix to try and see how do we improve that capture rate and the quality of those materials. This is just how it's crystallised a little. So coverage and targeted materials are probably the two key parameters there. So we accept that Metro councils are going to have a different arrangement to rural councils and to regional councils in between, but can they work towards, over time, going up that level of better practice? So is that weekly FOGO and a fortnightly residual waste collection. Controversial, I know, right now in this room, as everyone's kind of working around contamination levels, but how do we work towards that? What are the contexts when that makes sense? Targeted materials, what goes in that yellow bin in particular, I guess, is a key question. And we've come up with a range of options from not ambitious to reasonably ambitious. And what we're doing right now is going through into cost-benefit analysis phase over the next 6 months or so to try and really tease out what the costs, the benefits, the distribution of those costs and benefits across the chain might look like. And then also how do you fill the gaps, soften the impacts, compensate as required. Just some further reflections around this harmonisation piece. We also trying to align with the value chain up and down. So it's not just obviously between councils, it's like what is going into the system, what's coming out. Now, our key framework, our key entry point for this was by necessity the collections model, the collections network, because that's the project. But you can't do that alone in isolation. In fact, it's probably the wrong starting point to get a real alignment across the chain. We did some work with APCO and the National Packaging Targets Review, and it was quite clear that while there is good engagement by the brand owners, to some extent by packages, there also is a lot of frustration with the voluntary nature of the targets, the lack of traction, and obviously then most companies, a lot of companies apart from a few stellar ones, are kind of back-ending their activity because they don't want to be caught out as an early mover, losing market share for higher costs, and then finding that nobody's moved, or they're going to move at 2024 and a minute to midnight. So there are key challenges with that kind of voluntary model, and 30% of plastic is imported. Of packaging. It's either in empty or in filled packaging in products. And so how do we have that national packaging targets apply to that? Well, the answer is currently they don't. The prep tool that sits behind the national packaging targets is completely opaque. No one really understands how the assessments come down that inform the Australian recycling label. And if you don't understand that, then how do we have, again, an alignment through the chain? How does the ACCC have confidence in the claims that have been made? So there is, I think, some significant issues around that. We've been trying to align the collection system to see what's happening at the top end of the chain, but there's a lot of work needs to be done at that top end to align downwards as well. Downstream, obviously MRFs are going to differ between metro and regional areas. We're not saying that everyone's going to have the same, because that's not realistic. But there's also differences between recycling companies. Vizzy's very invested in its fibre business, doesn't like soft plastics. Cleanaway is more open to that sort of business. Others are, IQ Renew, very strongly pro. So there's a real tension in that downstream market as to what inclusion should be in the curbside collection. So trying to unpack those issues is going to be an interesting one. And then just the mix of state and territory regulations is a constant point of friction, both what you can put on the market, single-use plastics, compostables or not compostables, and then what can end up in your organics bin, for example. So we're wrestling with all of those issues. This is my second last slide, and then I'll throw to the floor. Just two broader reflections on the collections piece then, and how harmonisation, which is kind of, everyone hates that word, so I like to just think of a greater consistency, plays into broader benefits than just what we're talking about here. And one is that we've heard about the need for shared services and the increasing interest in joint procurement. Again, a lot of resistance to that, but the need for larger facilities, increasing costs, and greater control and influence in the market is driving interest in councils coming together in some way, shape or form, whether that takes it through to the procurement piece or whether it's just aligning more closely with their contracts. So there is an opportunity for industry to bid at scale, is a side benefit. of increasing harmonisation. The other one then is resilience, and that's obviously very large in the Sydney context and the Northern Rivers context to natural disaster. We're doing some work with SS Rock Councils at the moment in response to that Sydney crisis of last year, trying to figure out how do we have contingency planning and business continuity planning, what are the plan Bs and Cs to if something goes offline, such as Woodlawn, such as Lucas Heights, or such as the Vizzy Murph at Smithfield, for example. If that was to go up in a fire, what are our alternatives? So if we have greater consistency of specifications in those collection models, then it's easier to pivot to some alternative facility. Similarly, Lismore Murph is the same story up here, I suppose. So my key message then is we do have some big picture challenges around big picture waste infrastructure and resource recovery issues, as we heard about before. They do need to be solved, but we also need that broader perspective of other drivers outside and upstream from the waste sector to make sure that we're really de-risking and taking down the cost of that recovery and infrastructure and activity. And that's me.
Thanks, Richard. So another great presentation on things that are happening out there, and sort of the key themes that are emerging are really around standardising, circularity and harmonisation. In that harmonisation piece, half of that project really is to try and ensure that there's some consistency to materials that are coming through the system. Do you think that's going to result in the need, in order for those materials to become part of the circular economy, is there a need for additional infrastructure to be able to manage those harmonised streams?
Clearly there is. The other driver at the same time is we have 80% average resource recovery targets nationally and in New South Wales. We do need, and we're going to have a perfectly circular economy by 2030 as well, according to Tanya Plibersek. So we do need to step up that. I guess what we're trying, this is about trying to provide greater certainty about the material, the input materials into those facilities.
Okay. Anyone from the floor has a question for Richard? We've got, thanks.
Thanks, Esther again, MRA. Really, that harmonisation piece, I'm just wondering, have you looked into regional areas where we don't necessarily have the 3 bins? How would that work for places that don't have the population, the infrastructure to recycle close by, long transport distances and that type of stuff?
Yep, great question. And we're very alert to that. And so it's not... So a few answers to that. One is there's a whole range of options to be taken forward to the next stage. So there isn't a single answer. That I guess we're testing multiple different options. The thinking is that there's no expectation that everyone has a Sydney-based oriented kind of model or a Victorian model with 4 bins and soft plastics by 2030. The idea is that if you're in a regional area, we have a model that applies to the regional area more broadly, and try and up the basic best practice model. So define it for a metro context, define it for a regional context. And that's one option, all the way through to everybody does try and work towards a 3-bin model at the most ambitious.
So incremental changes being the outcome of any type of harmonisation, I think.
Absolutely. There's no time frame attached to this, and we haven't kind of turned our head to mechanisms to reduce the friction and reduce the cost of that. So yes, how it is implemented and over what time frame, ultimately I think it becomes a political decision, and certainly well beyond my pay grade.
Hopefully this is not beyond your pay grade, Richard.
Angus
Johnston, Jackson Environment and Planning. You were talking about the design side earlier on in your presentation, and that seems an integral pathway to the circular economy, have any chance of getting to the circular economy by 2030. And you're obviously doing some work for the feds. Are you seeing them making moves towards what might move the dial on that side, the design side? Because it doesn't really look like it from a distance.
Yeah, but they just changed the kind of machinery of government. So they've announced last week circular economy unit within DQ. They've also got a curbside harmonisation team, badged as such. So that, read into that what you will. There seems to be some crystallisation of resources to help deliver that. The response to the eco design project, that was been with them since November probably. It was launched in April. There was a lot of interest in it. We did some internal government workshops and presentations around the place. I did 2 of those, which were well attended, so there's interest. I guess where the political will goes, really don't know exactly. Part of the framing of the project was, this is not a project for you to identify all the levers that government can do. This is a government and industry, all of economy sort of framework, and we try to find levers that everyone can play a role in. And I think they'll probably stand behind that pretty strongly.
Hi, Richard. Me again. I had another question about the design as well. I noticed that you put in the National Construction Code as a method to have a lever to have a standard,
yep.
Which is a national measure, which is great because it would have to be implemented across Australia. There are other ways of doing that, and perhaps a state by state or a council level as well. Have you examined those using something like a basics formula or a DCP lever or something at a state level as well? Or is your project more national based? And that?
Yeah, we didn't get down to that level. It was more nationally based. The intent behind that one in particular is that while Green Buildings Council around commercial buildings and big buildings is great, we needed to engage the trades, not just the big property owners, and we need to roll it out to residential building and start making it just business as usual across a wider portfolio of building types. So that's the intent of that one, is to really make sure that the tradesmen understand exactly what they're doing and make it just start part of business as usual for them. We didn't get down into state-based sort of basics and those sorts of things. It's a good thought.
No other questions? Thank you. Thank you, Richard. We do tend to sit in our silos a bit and think, is anybody looking into this? So there's some great examples there of Richard's work where government is actually trying to explore what the problem is and then what the solution might be. So interesting. I've got 2 microphones here. Sorry. Okay, I'm not having a great day on the mics. Okay, David Gamble's next. GHD have also been doing a lot of interesting work. David's the Senior Technical Director for Waste Infrastructure, and David has specialised in delivering waste management infrastructure projects for more than 25 years. He has a particular, it's quite sad when you start saying 25 years, isn't it? David has a particular interest in environmental approvals for waste processing and resource recovery, including energy from waste infrastructure. And he is, like all of us, keen to see some more key waste infrastructure in New South Wales. So please welcome David Gamble.
Yeah, no, thanks, Catherine. That was an excellent introduction. I don't have to tell anyone any more about myself. It's great to be back here at Coffs Harbour. I think Greg gave me a special card because I think I've been coming here for like 15 or 20 years or so. I like the observation made this morning by the Deputy Mayor about how everyone in society is contributing to the problem and a small group, which is our industry, is really working hard to try and solve the problem. So congratulations everyone for your contributions. What I've observed over the years is that things seem to take a lot longer to happen than anyone ever plans for. And that's one of the reasons I want to do the presentation today. I'm going to be just talking about the very topical issue of supporting waste infrastructure development in New South Wales. Like some but not all of my thunder was stolen this morning by the session, but the more people that say it, the better the chances that people will listen and take action, I think. So I'm not disheartened by all the discussion this morning. I'm very encouraged by it. So I'm going to set the scene first and then provide my point of view on possible solutions. And I'm focusing, because of the scale of the topic, just on MSW and C&I, in other words, the putrescible waste, and on the Sydney region, not because regional is not important, but we have a problem of huge magnitude in Sydney, and in servicing the future waste needs of a global city. And so I'm hoping to provide some solutions. So the current waste infrastructure in New South Wales generally is insufficient to meet current and future needs, especially in Sydney. We've seen events that have stopped waste going to Woodlawn landfill and to Lucas Heights. We've seen fires in waste transfer stations and MRFs. We know there are delays for collection vehicles at waste facilities, and we know that our transfer stations are really not optimised for resource recovery. The newer ones are, but there's a vast network of very old transfer stations which are really just designed for bulking up and transfer to remote facilities. And interestingly, the forecast by the DPE was that landfill airspace will run out by 2028. And that's only 5 years away for non-putrescible waste, and by 2036 for putrescible waste. So we really do have a big problem, and we've got to get onto that pretty quickly. And also we're not achieving the waste targets. Waste generation per capita is still rising. Recycling rates haven't improved greatly. C&I well below targets. C&D even has fallen. So that, we thought that we were doing really well in C&D, but we're really not. We're starting to fall behind. And then we've got the new waste targets, reduced by 10%, etc., 80% average recovery rate, and then halving the amount of organic waste sent to landfill by 2030. That is a huge challenge. But we do have a plan. We have the New South Wales Waste and Sustainable Materials Strategy of 2041, and we have a guide which gives us a little bit more detail. And I know that you can't read all that, but another slide further on has a little bit more detail. So the question is the timing right for infrastructure delivery? How will it be delivered and by who? Are the nominated mix of facilities correct? Can they be delivered before capacity runs out? There are significant time delays between the idea of implementing something and actually being commissioned. Are they going to be commercially viable? No one's going to build them if they're not. Are there stable end markets for the materials? And then how long before the technologies are likely to be superseded? So there was some not much information actually on how those figures were derived about running out of landfill airspace. So I took it upon myself to do a bit of rough and ready Excel modelling, and I did a business as usual case, and this is just for the putrescible waste. And lo and behold, we do run out of landfill space in 2039 if you assume certain capacities for Woodlawn and Lucas Heights, because we're reliant on those two landfills. But once you start adding in some of the infrastructure like FOGO, AWT, and then you put in energy from waste, and then it magically extends out that line. And we also within that plan there are, like it says, one new major putrescible waste landfill by I think it's 2030, but I'll go into that. And obviously that sort of, it's like a pressure valve releases the pressure. So I did also try and model the additional diversion from each of those, and you can see that like the business as usual case is not looking very good. You know, we basically end up only diverting about 1 million tonnes a year for eternity. So we need to like step up and do a lot more. And if we deliver on based on the strategy, you know, we're recovering sort of like 3 million tonnes a year. So these are all my rough and ready numbers. That's why I didn't provide any more detail. I don't want people going through and saying, "Oh, David, you forgot to add that bit in." But anyway, like annual waste landfill, as you can see, is going to keep rising, and there's no hope of eliminating landfill in this way. So, like, what new waste infrastructure is required? So the strategy outlines a number of things, including what they call a dirty MRF, which I'm not sure exactly what it is, but 300,000 tonnes a year, or I just surmised maybe 2 at 150 because 300 is a big commercial risk. And I put in 3 FOGO AD facilities. It actually said 1.1 million tonnes per year of FOGO capacity, but there's about 300,000 tonnes a year in the wings at the moment. So I was conservative, I just put that in. And I allowed for one 600,000 tonne energy from waste plant by 2030. I guess I'm assuming the Woodlawn will be approved because there are no others really in the pipeline at the moment. And then the two, one addressable waste landfill able to receive 500,000 tonnes a year, and I'm assuming that's going to be have to be in a regional area. And I won't just say exactly where I think that could be, but there's probably a few people in the room who might have a guess. And then, longer term, we'll need another 2 large landfills, or one landfill that can receive quite a bit and has huge capacity, and another couple of energy from waste facilities. So in the good old days, when Belrose Transfer Station was being constructed, you could virtually build anything you like anywhere, and you didn't have all these sort of barriers in place. But there are a number of barriers now, siting, planning and approvals, which was talked about a lot this morning, the whole public perception issue, and that sort of relates to social impacts and licence to operate. New regulations, and the huge thing is, of course, financing and tendering risks, which are based really on the above. And then the whole tendering process itself can be very problematic. For a project that we're working on, we retrieved some of the old Waste Service New South Wales reports, and this is like from the annual report of like 1991. And you can see all these like magic waste facilities in the Sydney region, which, some of which are now closed landfills, some of them got transfer stations on still. But, it was a much more simple sort of time then. So right now there's no locations available in the Sydney region for new landfills, and they're only going to be remote locations. So it's going to require rail connections and like intermodal sites, much how Woodlawn's been set up, and probably multiple ones of those rather than just one. From a resilience point of view as well, we can't just rely on single facilities that may be affected by natural disasters, etc. And then it brings with it like significant planning and community issues. Nobody wants a waste facility in their region or in their local government area, potentially. And the case study was really, Woodlawn, Clyde and Banks Meadow. Banks Meadow I think got through a lot easier, but there was a hell of a fight to get Woodlawn and Clyde approved. Transfer stations, there's, the issues of size, neighbours, trucks, 24/7 operation. Even FOGO, because of the potential odour issues, most likely have to be regional locations served by transfer stations. And then we come to the vexed question of energy from waste. We're obviously now prohibited in the Sydney region. Currently there were 4 precincts declared, there's only effectively 3 now. And there are some possibilities of exemptions for former mining sites, but that really has not been tested. So most waste facilities are, state significant development. Most of the ones I work on anyway. Planning process, a number of steps, typically 12 months to prepare and lodge an EIS, subject to things like biodiversity, which has become a huge sort of risk for proponents, because the species keep changing all the time. The credits are expensive, the credits are potentially unavailable, and nobody knows what they're going to cost. So that's an issue for not just waste projects, but any other project. There are guidelines for preparing things like scoping reports, etc., but there are no statutory timeframes apart from where the SEER is being issued and public exhibition periods, and the timing for determination is unknown. And there are a number of areas where delays may occur. So if the project's inadequately defined, if there's an adverse community reaction, if there's a lack of council support. And then there are, unfortunately, additional requests from agencies for more detailed information which go beyond the original SEERs, and they create delays. New requirements to do social impact assessment, which tends to be a bit subjective. And then the project can trigger a referral to the IPC if there's more than 50 unique objections or council doesn't agree with it. So I think one of the key issues to me is the whole community issue. Consultations, really important as far as waste facilities go. But I think in recent years, people out in the community have started to distrust science, and they distrust experts, and they believe whatever they want to believe. So the access to information has enabled a spread of misinformation, and then a lot of people become armchair experts, and they generate their own followers, etc. So then you end up with a mob mentality who sort of seeks to basically override sensible debate about these projects. But the approval agencies are required to have regard to number and content of these objections, however silly they might be. But they have to assess based on merit. And I mentioned before about this number of submissions. So the good way to stop a project, just get 50 people to write crap and send it into the Department of Planning and off to the IPC. So the whole social impact thing, there are social impact assessment guidelines. It's really a new and emerging area. It should be a way to actually address those community issues and just sort of mitigate them. But it's like lawyers, you can never get the same opinion from two lawyers. They each have a different way of looking at the world, and people who do SIA don't necessarily agree with each other on what's an important issue and what's not. The social licence to operate is not currently a requirement of the SEERs, but I've heard it mentioned 3 or 4 times today already. And that, the community opinion can be swayed by any sort of negative publicity, etc. So then immediately, what are your chances of getting social licence to operate in a situation like that? And it's also difficult for anyone who's new to the industry with no past performance history to achieve that social licence. So one of the key things is about, changing regulations. When someone gets something approved and then suddenly the regulations change and you can no longer operate the way it was designed or approved. So even during the approval process, the regulations can change. So the MWU ban's been mentioned previously, and FOGO only partially replaces MBT, so we've still got a lot of residual waste that remains untreated. Energy from waste was expected to fill that void, avoiding that pun, I guess. Plant siting is now determined by the regulations, so it may or may not happen in the longer term. But a key point is major investment in waste infrastructure requires long-term regulatory certainty. So as I said before, the financial and tendering risks sort of tend to follow from all those other things. So if you can sort out all those other things, these sort of become less significant. So one of the key things is that all the proponents are required really to purchase their own sites, and even going and doing a site selection thing is quite problematic, because as soon as someone realises what you're up to, you know, the community group gets formed, and before you've even started getting the project together, you know, there's a bunch of people opposing it, or they're buying the land up, you know, so one thing or another. So companies won't build facilities unless they've got the waste. Susie mentioned that this morning, you know, can't help labouring that point. And then the councils won't tender unless it's a lower cost than landfilling, so inevitably it won't be, so there needs to be some way of addressing that gap. And then, like, whilst, you know, commercial waste operators are sort of, you know, keen to be involved, there's probably not long enough certainty to build some of these facilities. So really, you know, MSW, councils, etc., have a key role to play in getting some of this infrastructure up and running. So the tendering process, approvals, etc., could take 3 or 4 years, you know, for just a simple facility like a FOGO, let alone like an energy from waste plant. And any sort of new entrants, I guess, you know, it's kind of stacked against them potentially. So what are the possible solutions? And this is my last slide, everyone. So the siting issue, just wondering, and this is me thinking aloud, I'm not a socialist or anything, but just wondering whether the New South Wales government could take a role in as part of a waste infrastructure plan in actually identifying and purchasing key sites to take away that sort of risk from the proponents, and maybe long-term lease, so it basically becomes like a concession. You know, you've got a 25-year concession to operate on this site, so build what you like, etc. There's a number of models where that already works, and I think the water industry is a key area. In the approval side, there is a priority assessment program. Waste facility is not included in there currently, but it could, and that has statutory timeframes associated with it. In the community side, we all need to get better at, I guess, at communicating the benefits of the infrastructure, and I guess kind of reminding everyone that, you know, everybody produces waste. We've all got a responsibility to look after it, and you know, we've got to do it as locally as we can. And if we can't do it locally, we've got to support a city or something like Sydney, which is a global city, brings a lot of, you know, wealth to the New South Wales economy, etc. In regard to social impacts, the potential tightening up of the SIA framework may remove the potential for misuse, as I've called it, by community groups, etc. Regulations, you know, and this is where, yeah, my particular view on those precincts is that they should be either expanded or scrapped, and I think other people may have expressed that opinion as well. Yeah, the planning system should be robust enough to support these new facilities, you know, through the state significant planning developments. It doesn't need the government to try and pick winners. Markets, you know, increase incentives for using recycled projects within government projects, obviously state and also local government. And then I mentioned that, you know, about the purchasing of land, etc. You know, they'll reduce some of that financial risk. And it may only be needed for things like, you know, contentious projects. And then some innovative tendering, and that's where we're talking about alliances this morning, which are used, you know, widely in the water industry, to make it a bit easier for the whole tendering process without all the probity issues that seem to be raised and stop negotiations. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Stay there for a minute. I'll ask you a question.
Yeah.
Thanks, David. Some really great content in that presentation. Excuse me. One, just in the last couple of months, I've been involved in a regional community round of consultation on developing waste strategies. And in this community, it was on the back of the collapse of Re.Cycle, and this community is also looking like it might possibly house a plastics refinery facility. And so when we're involved in the community consultation, you've got everybody saying they want a solution for soft plastics, and then you go for a drive out to the site and every second house has got a sign up, no refinery near me. Okay.
Actually, plastics recycling and reprocessing facility, not even the refinery, so a lot of misinformation out there.
So whose role is it to step into this space where we need a social licence for waste facilities and waste infrastructure? Is it the consent authorities or the approval bodies? Because it's too expensive for proponents and too onerous for proponents of facilities to be expected to respond to this sort of social backlash or interest in it. You know, the consent authorities, we have a huge obligation in our industry to do things carefully, but is there a need for somebody else to step in and manage this difficulty?
I wish I knew the answer, but that particular project, we've prepared the EIS. It's a plastics recycling plant in Mossvale, and it's in an existing industrial area, and it ticks all the boxes, but the community hate it. They think it should go somewhere else, and so it's a major battle. And I guess it was one of the inspirations for me preparing this presentation, because working with a proponent for 3 years and just continually getting frustrated by this process, you can sort of see things need to change, because how are we going to deal with the soft plastic? Somebody's got to step up and put in the investment, and they're just going to get put off the entire idea if they can't get some certainty on the approvals. So I don't know, I really wish I knew the answer, but...
Yeah, maybe somebody in the audience
well,
does.
The next stage of the process is we're going to the Independent Planning Commission, so there is a merit-based assessment there, and we're hoping that common sense will prevail, but we've certainly adjusted the project to minimise all the potential impacts, so to the extent that everything's being done inside a giant building, and minimising truck movements, minimising water use, everything that a proponent could try and do, but it's basically still not good enough. So that's where the key challenge is, I think, with the community and trying to get them on board. And my experience in this area is once you build these things, you never hear a complaint afterwards. And I think a lot of people in the councils here will probably have had that same experience. Once you start operating, and in the major waste companies, people just tend to they accept it, and then it never, if it's compliant with all its conditions, there's never any issue.
Good answer, good
Thank
answer.
you.
Thank you. I definitely have something to say about this. So as planners, we get the sort of the backlash, the feedback about how bad the waste industry, and immediately everyone thinks of a testable waste facility. And yet we're talking about a circular economy here, and we're talking about MRFs taking on more and more responsibility for the end product, for the recycled plastic, for the recycled glass, other people entering into this reprocessing manufacturing market, yet we don't have a definition for the end of waste. So it's, in my opinion, it's definitely a state government, perhaps even a national government issue to increase the profile of waste and to get over to that resource recovery idea, to educate people not only in how to recycle, but what waste is as a resource, and to flip that mindset. So there's a whole lot of questions there about education and about, just raising the profile of the waste industry in general. And interestingly enough, that has big implications for the planning industry, for probably the time frames, for the community response, and the misconceptions about where your waste goes and what happens to it in the end. So I would put that back on to a coordinated state government program for education.
So David, a comment and a question. My first comment is the last list of actions that we could take that would improve things, the first point citing, that looked very much like the situation that was in place when the Metropolitan Waste Disposal Authority, which became the Waste Management Authority, which became Waste Service New South Wales, and before the inception of the EPA, when they were in charge of everything, and nobody ever complained about citing, because there was no avenue for them to complain. So,
deliberately,
I actually sat in presentations where they said this was a popular proposal because no one complained. And I guess I'd say, do we really want to go back to that situation? But the point about social licence, when Matt Keane was the Environment Minister, virtually every presentation he gave about waste talked about social licence being a really important ingredient. But like you highlighted, never really defined. What the heck is social licence? Is it no one complains? Or is it, which probably means you've managed to slip it through without them noticing? Or is it you've somehow given the local community a package of benefits that they're not going to complain too loud? Or is it really that it's a really popular proposal, which is almost impossible?
Yeah. It's certainly a challenge. There was some deliberate, the diagram that I used there from Waste Service was, inferring exactly what you said, Lee, that 25 years ago, 30 years ago, the government had a bigger role in selecting sites. And although I know some of them were opposed, like Castlereagh, etc., a lot of them were approved because people trusted the government. People said, well, the government, and they know they're looking at it from a bigger picture there. And I don't think that kind of element of trust is there particularly with the private companies. People don't trust people anymore in the commercial side, and they should, but they don't. And that's why if a private sector operator wants to do something, the community are immediately suspicious. If the government says, well, we're acquiring the land for a future this or that, then maybe that will change the situation and maybe that will swing things around a bit. So that's just my observation. Thanks, Lee.
Any other questions? No, I don't think so.
Everyone's exhausted.
Yeah. But the upshot of that is that we have run out of time for this session. I was going to bring the panel back up for some more questions, but I'm sure they'll hang around if anybody wants to ask them anything in particular. Really some great things to think about, and I think there's some clear messaging coming out of the sessions today for sure. So please thank the panel or the session presenters we've had here today.